Ladies and gentlemen, I must admit, I'm starting to get bored of the news, the constant attacks against Romon, and to a large degree, even Morning Shot are really getting tiring. But before I get on to the news of today, can I please once again ask you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Really does help. Do all the usual things. Share it with your friends. Like the video. And if you really want to support me and the work I do, buy me a coffee. The link's in the description below. All these things do help promote the channel and really do help us grow an audience. And grow an audience would be swell. So let us first get on to the main news story. So before we get on to the other news stories, such as why Fikile and Balula and the South African Communist Party are going at each other's throats, it becomes pertinent just to address the Romon issue. You see, the issue seems to have been ongoing for some time now, and the media really don't seem to be dying down on this. There's a few things really that actually become important. The first is, Romon is commonly referred to as far-right and a racist and a bigot because he used certain terms. It becomes really interesting because, you see, prior to actually getting the position, Romon knew that the media would go digging and they would use certain tweets and certain videos out of context, because that's what the news does. I'll give you an example of this one around guns in South Africa and why South Africa is safe. See, the problem is Romon didn't actually say that comment. Kantan Pillay did. And Romon simply retweeted it, having done an interview with him, encouraging people to go listen to the interview. But you see, now the tweet is attributed to Romon with no context. You see, this was always going to be the problem. Inevitably, Romon also used the phrase about Bantu people. You see, the biggest problem is that when you use this phrase Bantu people, he didn't actually use that phrase. The Crown Prince of the Pedi did, and he repeated it, encouraging people to go watch the interview he did with the Crown Prince of the Pedi people. You see, context in this instance doesn't matter because the media want to portray Romon as being racist. And I covered this on Friday's video around political activism and the media. Now, for context, that video, I did also say that IOL had been found guilty of deliberately doctoring the video. I also put a note in the description, and I'm going to reiterate it here. I just want to make it clear. IOL didn't get found as having doctored the video, but what they did say is that they didn't actually have the evidence to say whether they did doctor it deliberately or whether or not the video was supplied to them in a doctored manner. What really was important is that the IOL could have easily fact-checked the video. They could have easily gone out there and verified the authenticity of it and could have seen the original. But they failed to do so. Why? Because they wanted to engage in a degree of political activism. And you see, again, we're seeing comments of this even from Herman Pretorius, who, again, you would think was a friend of the channel, right? Well, apparently not. IOL have clearly aligned themselves with far-left dogma, which is ironic because a couple of years ago, Ivor of the RRR wrote an article about how Romon and I were so far right that we actually went left. All this because we happened to agree with a speech given by then Dlamini Zuma. And apparently that wasn't allowed because, you know, we agreed with her on some stuff and we had our own opinions, which is really what we're ultimately all about. This is our opinion. The show is an opinion show. It's an analysis based on our opinion. Now, you see, ultimately, you may look at that and say, well, why was this important? Well, look at this example from Herman Pretorius. This line here, how could you be so long? We talk, right? That's talking down to individuals as if they're stupid. Would you like me to rather write a 20-hour thesis on why this line maybe has some context to it? Or should we actually take the context in which it's given? Should I talk about how in the 5th century, St. Jerome used the literal interpretation, and for the longest time it was deemed to be controversial because it conflicted with Catholic tradition, and it wasn't until the Protestant Reformation Catholic tradition became problematic, which led to Martin Luther going and criticizing it, and then everybody saying the tradition was fake. And basically what we should do is just rely on the Bible. And then people wanted to know how to interpret the Bible. And they went for the literal interpretation. And the literal interpretation is boring, bud. It's boring. No one wants to hear that. I can give you a long thesis, almost like we're doing a Vladimir Putin interview, where it's a 5-hour interview of one time at Bandcamp. But nobody wants to hear that. What people really want to do is get a succinct argument, a succinct principle, an idea, and leave. And this ultimately becomes the problem because when Morning Shot does that to individuals, when we portray what we think, yeah, now it's a problem, right? And we're seeing it again with Dan. Look at Dan Corden. Dan Corden did a video on Sunday around the big scary appointment of Roman Kavanagh. And far left Dan had very interesting things to say. He used the same tweets that everybody else has resurfaced. So none of these are his. They just happen to be tweets that were grabbed offline without any context. On top of that, Romon is apparently a hard right provocateur who goes out there to deliberately stir up controversy. And if you know Romon, that's kind of true. But in the far right fashion, he then says, look, Romon dares to question the things that we've all accepted to be true. Who's we, bud? Who's we? Are you now not allowed to question the official narrative? Is that what you're becoming, bud? You're becoming a mouthpiece of the official narrative. On top of that, he even goes as far as to say, look at Romon. He put himself in parliament for the purple card, the capitalist party. Those stupid capitalists. So Dan Gordon has now firmly put himself in the commie socialist party. Now, we all know that Dan and Herman Pistorius are both disciples of the soy. But at the end of the day, we're not. We have our own opinions, we have our own views, and at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you don't have to watch the show. But it's still our views, and it's still our opinion, and we're entitled to them. Should Romon somehow be subject to scrutiny because of his views? This is the problem with liberals. Yeah, it's all a battle of ideas. Until people don't agree with your ideas, then it's shut up that guy, and you can say, oh, it's a battle of ideas, but it's a battle of ideas of just mine, so long as you listen to mine. And so from that perspective, I must say that the entire kerfuffle is just getting really, really boring. And from that perspective, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize to you from having to rant about it for a few minutes, but it is really, really tiring. In other news, you know it's also tiring. Academics and experts. So apparently the latest news from Jonathan at the University of Pretoria is that the word Africa is now a racial slur, and we should rename the continent. Yeah, these people are dumb. This proves Elon Musk's comment that just because you have a degree doesn't mean you have any form of intelligence. Talking of Elon Musk, apparently X has now been banned in Brazil, and they're talking of banning it everywhere where it doesn't agree with the official narrative. Pretty sure Dan would agree with that. So in Brazil, apparently they've banned the use of X, and if you actually use a VPN now to access X in order to, get some news and some comments that the official socialist news doesn't want you to see, you could be fined $8,900 a day that you use your VPN. It's pretty unreal. So that also becomes really important because you see the reason that they are now citing that they want to ban Twitter is because Twitter is being used for misinformation. Yep, that old trope. Whenever you don't want somebody to say something that you don't like, you just class it as misinformation. Now what Dan even called our show. It's a show based on conspiracy theories and misinformation. Even though if you've actually watched our show for any length of time, 99.99% of the time, we actually get most of what we predict right. It's kind of scary. But you see, we have to put this into context because further news last week was that Facebook came out and basically admitted that they had worked with the administration in order to silence posts. The administration had come out and told them what posts were acceptable, and they just went along with it. Now Mark Zuckerberg is now apologizing and saying, I was deeply wrong that we censored people and their official views that turned out to be fact, and we called them misinformation. We caused havoc to those people's lives and their businesses and everything they had to say. And Mark Zuckerberg now says it shouldn't have happened. It was a violation of free speech. You may ask yourself the question, why is he doing that? Well, it looks like Trump may win the election, and then Trump's going to hold him accountable, and he's already seeking apologies before Trump comes and gives him a PK. Talking of giving people a PK, the president now says that he is going to take construction mafias and extortion cartels seriously, and it's time that we get rid of all of these. So the president basically says in the Western Cape that he understands it's a big problem. He's going to put more boots on the ground, and then goes on to say that he's going to tackle illegal firearms. The problem, but is not the illegal firearms. Of course, illegal firearms are a problem. We shouldn't have loads of illegal firearms flying around that are used for crimes, usually given to the criminals by the police. Let's not forget that. So police corruption is one of the major issues. But another issue is actually the creation of construction mafias and extortion syndicates in the first place. So what you should actually really be doing is focusing on those guys, because according to some of the ANC guys, these aren't actually construction mafias and extortion syndicates. They're business forums. Yep, they actually said that. Business forums. So the actual problem really is the cartels and the extortion rackets themselves. That's really where you need to start. But it's always easier to focus on the illegal firearms because everybody understands that most of the crimes are committed by illegal firearms. Yes, illegal firearms are a problem, but you need to start with the actual cause of the issue in the first place. Now, talking of ANC issues, the South African Communist Party and Fikile Mbalula have got into it. They got stuck into each other and they're having a disagreement. This all started from an interview that Solly, the chief exec, if you want to call him that, the head of the South African Communist Party, gave. And during that, apparently Solly said that the GNU is, and I quote, gives him sleepless nights, is a gross error, it's a criminal, it's a betrayal. And he says that what he would have preferred is actually the ANC going to bed with the EFF, because whilst it may have been irritating, because the EFF would do, EFF things, at least the EFF aren't neoliberal. I'm not a neoliberal. I'm a Christian nationalist. I want to be clear on that. So I'm not here to defend the DA. But that being said, the DA is clearly better than the EFF. I think we can all understand that. Now, you see, it's very interesting because Fikile Mbalula says, all very well for you to say that, but at the end of the day, you're the socialist part of the ANC, but not really part of the ANC, right? He says that the ANC is not a branch of the SACP and the SACP is not a branch of the ANC. Throwing insults at the ANC, according to Fikile Mbalula, by Solly, is nothing more than what he says is grandstanding on public platforms. He says that calling everything a gross error should be deemed to be nothing more than his, analysis. Nothing more than us, really. And Fikile Mbalula says that if you believe that the ANC has shifted, you should probably come to the ANC and have a talk with us about it. But you see, the problem is that the SACP were kind of sidelined in this current cabinet. You see, what would typically happen, and happened underneath the last administration, is that the SACP took some very prominent positions in cabinet. And now those cabinet ministers have shifted to parties in the GNU. And the SACP, to be honest, isn't really that important to the ANC anymore. And interestingly enough, that's actually a position that support. And Fikile Mbalula goes on further. It says that, and I quote, the ANC is neither capitalist or a socialist party. Our relationship with capital is unity and the struggle of the opposite. We are a multi-ideological party. At best, you can say we are social democrats. The burden to advance the struggle of socialism is on the South African Communist Party. And I must say that this position that Fikile Mbalula is now espousing isn't actually unique. It's something that the Crown Prince Adil told us during our interview with him. You can go back and watch that video. It's basically entitled, Why Should You Join the ANC? You see, wherever socialists get into positions of power, they always seem to want to silence everybody else's opposition by calling everything errors and misinformation and whatever other rubbish they can come out with. And in this instance, I must say, Fikile Mbalula is right on the money. The ANC does hold itself out to be a broad church. I mean, arguably in recent years, it has lent further to the left, specifically the far left. And Fikile Mbalula did say when forming the GNU that actually that had become an error of the ANC and that the ANC needed to return almost to the center. The biggest problem here is that we have this distinction of left and right, and this actually is where all the problems are coming in. To a large degree, the Overton window of left versus right really is kind of pointless these days. Everything's far right, and every time you think something is maybe center line or center left, they just move the needle a little bit more, and then it's far right again. There's no such thing as anything that apart from just far right. Everything's far right as long as you don't agree with someone. To the point where the term itself has actually become useless. Talking of useless terms, let's go on to another one, racist. So I brought you the story on Friday that apparently Ronaldo had been cleared of the whole racist debacle that he had. Well, not so fast. You see, IOL has said that they will be appealing the press ombuds ruling on this. And Ronaldo has suggested that he will be fighting that appeal all the way through. Unfortunately, it's going to be rather expensive. And if you do support Ronaldo, there's a link to his FundMe page in the description box below. And ladies and gentlemen, I suppose that's it for the news. I'll leave you with the last few images that are rather interesting to look at. Here's the first one from a Church of England Anglican. It says, we're all Muslims. No, you're not. You're Christian. There's a fundamental difference. Christians believe that Jesus was God incarnate. Muslims believe he was a prophet. There's a fundamental difference. If you accept him as Lord and Savior, then you're not a Muslim. Because Muslims say you can't do that. You can't get salvation from a man. You can only do it through God. So yeah, this is dumb. And talking of one more dumb thing, Keir Starmer has now come into office. And he said that he's removing Margaret Thatcher's portrait from number 10 Downing Street. It's been there for a very long time. The portrait was actually put up there not because of her economic positions, but because she managed to win the Falkland Islands and regained Britain's position as a powerhouse. Sir Keir doesn't really like that because I suppose she's a Tory. He doesn't like that. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, that's it from me. And I'm going to leave you with this last clip, which I actually found rather amusing. If you've ever thought of moving to Oblati, here's a clip of a local man talking about what it's like to live there. In any case, until next time.
I'm going to tell you a little story, all right? Sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's called A Day in the Life of an Englishman. Now, picture this. You're in London. It costs more than you earn to live here, so you're slowly accumulating debt. You can't afford a holiday, so you're addicted to drugs just to fucking escape your life. Oh. The weather's shit, the people that live here are even shitter, and they hate each other with a passion, and you can't afford to leave. There's homeless people all over the place. The shops are boarded up because of COVID. Anyway, you wake up one morning to find out your tax is going up because Labour's in. And this is after you, Les, the cost of living crisis, energy prices, interest rates have all eaten that last little bit of extra money you had left over each month from your wage and your outgoings. So now you're proper fucked. And while you're sat there on the toilet in the morning reading tweets from the Metropolitan Police about online trolls and how they upset them, a SWAT team smashes through your bathroom window, straight past you, on the shitter, and goes into your 11-year-old son's bedroom and arrests him for shouting at a police officer. Then your sister rings you. She's recently got fired from her job as a doctor for refusing to ask biological men if they're pregnant. And she tells you that your grandma's just frozen to death because Keir Starmer gave her winter allowance to a country on the other side of the planet that's wealthier than us to help them with climate change. Oh, yeah. It's all getting a little bit much anyway. And you think, you know what I'll do? I'll nip off for a pint to relax. Maybe I'll sit in the beer garden and have a fag. But while you're doing that, you get barred because that's illegal now. So you decide, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go for a walk to clear my head. Morning. And while you're on your walk, clearing your head, you get stabbed to death. Yes, stabbed to death violently, just walking around the city. Then the Guardian plasters your face all over the news for randomly jumping on a perfectly good knife 54 times that was held by a choir boy. Then your sister's enraged by this, so she tweets about it, she gets nicked. Your son comes out of prison, all right, and he decides, I'm going to protest it because my dad's dead. But this time he shouts at a police horse and he gets nicked for that. But the prisons are too full, so they let out Ian Huntley to put him in. Now, the mad thing about this tale is it doesn't even sound far-fetched anymore, does it? It's perfectly believable. I'll tell you why. Because it's all based on true events. Oh, this is our story. This is fucking England.